Hello my friends, welcome back to Garhdo Goes Geek. On today's episode, just a quick little review for Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. I've seen it, I have thoughts about it, I want to articulate those without waiting for a full episode, so here we go. So at this point, I think my thoughts are out there on this podcast in various places, various episodes, regarding pretty much every Marvel project that we've had so far. There are a couple from late last year that I haven't covered at time of recording this. I am planning to in one of the upcoming episodes that I'm still finishing off, where I talk about Wakanda Forever, Werewolf by Night, She-Hulk, that sort of thing. Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania is the latest Marvel project. It is ostensibly the launch of Phase 5. That's how Marvel are marketing it. That's how they revealed it would be treated. Having watched it, I think it's okay. I mean, it's a... The problem is... You know, I freely admit I am the audience for Marvel. Like, I am a long-time Marvel fan. I've been a huge fan of the Marvel comics for decades at this point. And I'm fully aware that I am the target audience for this. You know, being an established fan who cares about the continuity, who cares about these characters. And so, for me, I really enjoyed it. It's been quite divisive. A lot of reviews have been very mixed, but not having gone in depth in the reviews as yet, I wonder if a lot of the reviews are simply that people are getting tired of the formula, or maybe we're expecting a different movie. And the reason for that is... because of how this has been marketed as something huge and very impactful to the series, and the fact that, you know, we've had a lot of Marvel projects now all doing very specific things, doing very similar things, I should say. You know, the Marvel films do follow a formula, and it's a formula that works. It's a formula that gives, generally, solid B movies. By which I don't mean B movies, but like a B grade movie. You know, the Marvel films are all fine. Occasionally you get one that is spectacular, like The Winter Soldier or Ragnarok or Infinity War. But for the most part, most of them are just fine. And I think it's very rare that there's a bad movie. Even things like Eternals, which was the most divisive one up until this point, I don't think was bad. It was fine for what it was. It was trying to do some things very differently from the standard Marvel formula, if anything, Eternals, and probably paid the price for that. As it is, Ant-Man and the Wasp, it's fine. It's you know, Quantumania is a pretty good film. It's very CGI heavy. It uses the volume, the filming technique which has been established on the Disney Star Wars projects, specifically The Mandalorian and Kenobi. The environment that gives like an active CGI background that reacts to the camera. Personally, I think it works. You know, it does mean you have a lot of virtual sets, a lot of green screen, which obviously becomes somewhat contentious. But with how Quantumania is being framed, it works. Quantumania is being framed as very much a fantasy film, and there are sets in it as well. Like, even with the volume, there are sets, and some quite large sets, some quite extravagant sets. So it's not just the volume all the time. You know, there is other stuff going on. One criticism I will raise towards it, though, is that while it's very much focused on the character of Scott Lang, Ant-Man, the Wasp feels a bit more like a side character. And considering her name is on the title, I feel like it would have been nice if she'd have been given more of a role. However, the original Wasp, Janet Van Dyne, played by Michelle Pfeiffer, does get quite a lot to do. There's, there's some very good emotional moments for her character, which are a lot of fun and quite nice to see, because obviously she doesn't appear until towards the end of the previous Ant-Man and the Wasp film, so she hasn't really had a lot of chance to show herself off. So that was quite cool. And, Michelle Pfeiffer is a great actress, so, having her in a role and getting a chance to do something is great. It's a lot of fun. Obviously, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, is a sequel to both the first Ant-Man movie, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Avengers Endgame, and also Loki Season 1, although I don't think you would need to have seen the first season of Loki to enjoy this. Whereas obviously some recent Marvel projects, especially Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, it's felt very much like you will be missing some things if you haven't seen WandaVision. Now, part of that is because of the environment a lot of these films were being made in. When COVID was happening, like WandaVision couldn't pick up for reshoots due to COVID. Multiverse of Madness and Thor Love and Thunder, as well as Quantumania, were all filming during COVID. They were all hit by restrictions. They were all hit by the second wave where they had production broken. And, that's definitely had an impact. Anyone who said it hasn't would quite clearly be lying. All these films have been impacted due to COVID. And in some cases, they've come together really well despite this. Wakanda Forever is a great example of that. It was filmed during COVID, but it's a very good, very solid film. Some of them are a bit jumbled due to script rewrites and changes and maybe things that couldn't be done. And that's more true of Love and Thunder and Multiverse of Madness. Based on their deleted scenes, there was a lot that was changed as the films were being made. Quantumania doesn't feel like that. Quantumania does feel very tightly put together. The plot is fine. The main criticism, I suppose, for something that is a sequel to the first two Ant-Man movies is that it's very self-contained. By which I mean the previous films had quite a large supporting cast. There was Scott and Hope, the Wasp, and then obviously Hope's father, Hank. But there was also Scott's daughter, Cassie, his ex-wife, Maggie, Maggie's new partner that I've forgotten the name of at this point, and then his friends, Lewis and Kurt and Dave, who were all working at ex-con, and helped him in the heist and things like that. And unfortunately, pretty much all of those characters are missing. The five characters who reappear from previous films are Scott, Hope, Hank, Janet, and Cassie, and that's it. And that's because this film pretty much takes place almost entirely within the quantum realm. Which is essentially an elaboration of the comics microverse. Now, I don't hate this as a decision. I think it works for the film, and I think they present a very visually interesting world. And, you know, to me, there was no huge need to revisit some of those previous characters. You know, we've seen, you know, Lewis, Dave, and Kurt they got the XCOM business up and running in the last movie. That was their plot through that, and you know, it ended quite nicely. You know, there's no huge need to see those characters, to see that their concepts brought back in this movie. But it would be nice to see them again somewhere else down the line, perhaps. You know, maybe a second season of She-Hulk might feature XCon, you know, and have Lewis in that. I think that would work really well, rather than necessarily appearing here. Although there is a quick cameo by Jimmy Woo in this. It's a non-speaking cameo, and it's very early in the film, but it maybe would have been interesting if that had been Lewis, for example. But I think if Lewis had appeared and not spoken, people would still be criticising it almost as much as the fact he didn't appear at all, because part of Lewis's charm was Michael Pena's line delivery and the stories he told as the character. And so to have the character but not have him speak, I think would be just as derided. So I think it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. That said, I think the movie's fine. Weirdly, the movie made me think of Aquaman when I watched it. Aquaman takes place obviously exploring these undersea kingdoms, you know, Atlantis and, you know, all the different 7 kingdoms underneath the ocean. And, you know, it's a very fantastical world that you're sort of made privy to through the main characters. And there's a lot of that in this movie. You know, this is very much a fantasy, sci-fi exploration style story. You know, there's these gorgeous worldscapes and vistas and strange creatures and all these interesting characters and their political situations that were kind of thrust into the middle of. And then, of course, it's anchored by the main villain, who was spoiled in the trailer, but you get the feeling in the original movie perhaps would have been someone used almost as like a surprise villain. In fact, that's true of both of the villains in this. There's 2 main villains. First of all, there's MODOK, who is mechanized organism designed only for killing. And is revealed to be the character of Darren Cross from the first Ant-Man movie, who wound up in the quantum realm after the battle in that, where he was turned into the character of MODOK. And again, that's something I've also seen people deriding, especially the special effects for MODOK, because MODOK is essentially a giant head with tiny arms and legs sticking out the side. And, you know, there are points where you see MODOK's face, and it's literally Corey Stoll's face animated on a giant head. I personally think it's fine. It looks exactly like how MODOK would look in live action. I don't think there's any other way you could do that effect without it looking a bit goofy. It's like some of the stretching effects in Fantastic Four, you know, in the old Fantastic Four movies. There's only, you know, some things just look unnatural, no matter how you try and pull them off. And, you know, any sort of body warping is something that looks unnatural to a human eye. You can tell it's fake, you know, seeing a body stretched like that, you know, seeing a giant head. You know, you can tell it's fake, but it's still a real face. It's an animated real, you know, it's a filmed real face put over you know, this giant CGI head. It works well enough for what it is, and it looks like MODOK. And again, Darren Cross has been spoiled on the posters and on the trailers, revealing him as MODOK, which is how people are aware of this. You know, and you get the feeling that was meant to be a surprise in the movie, because, you know, MODOK appears after they've been in the quantum realm for a bit. And then, not long after after we're introduced to MODOK and we reveal who he is, we then get introduced to the Conqueror, who has been spoken of, but we haven't actually met yet. And this is Jonathan Majors' Kang. Now, Jonathan Majors appeared in Loki Season 1. He played the character of He Who Remains. And he spoke about a multiversal war, and how as a result of that multiversal war, there were versions of him that destroyed entire multiverses. And so he destroyed the multiverse and created the TVA to prevent variants of him existing. And, you know, this reveals that Kang is one of those variants, and one that, you know, it's quite clearly shown that we should be scared of, we should be threatened by. You know, he's clearly shown as being someone dangerous, someone who has threatened entire multiverses. And, you know, it's revealed that he has this history with the quantum realm, and, you know, he's been down there for some time. And he's the main villain, and he's a great main villain. He's a lot of fun. I think his introduction works really well. His costume looks absolutely incredible. And yeah, he's a threat, like a palpable threat. You know, not just physically. Like, Jonathan Majors has obviously recently done Creed 3, and, you know, if the trailer for Creed 3 showed before Ant-Man and the Wasp, but I've seen the trailer already anyway, so I know the physical shape he was in for that. But having that kind of reinforced to your audience just before this movie plays is quite good, because you know that underneath that suit he is ripped. And yeah, he's a lot of fun in this. He's very charming, you know, when he wants to be, but also very threatening at the right moments as well. And, you know, physically threatening as well as, you know, intimidating. And I think he works really well. The other main addition to the cast is Catherine Newton, who has become the third actress to play Cassie Lang. Now, Cassie in the first two Ant-Man films, especially the second one, was one of my favourites. The child actress that they got to play her was very good. You know, she felt like a genuine kid. Obviously, she was a genuine kid, but, you know, she played that role very well. That I really bought the connection between her and Scott. I think the trailers for this movie are kind of perhaps overselling, you know, Scott's arc regarding Cassie in this movie, because there's not quite as much of it as there is in the trailer. Like, for example, the scene where he pulls out the phone and it's got the picture of young Cassie as his screensaver. That's not in the movie at all. You know, he does pull out the phone, but it's someone else calling him. It's not Cassie, and it's not that picture. You know, that picture might be on his phone, but it's not as we see it. So, you know, there's definitely some trailer editing. And like I said, Kang as well, Kang's reveal seems to have been something that was added into the trailers. while clearly meant to have been something that was more hidden for the movie. I wonder if this is because... I wonder if they're doing this because Jonathan Majors was announced as being part of this a long time ago. Like, you know, his addition to the movie wasn't a shock. Everyone knew he was going to be in this. It was his reveal in Loki season 1 that was the shock. That was what people weren't expecting. You know, he was added as Kang the Conqueror explicitly when the movie was announced that they were doing Quantumania. He was going to be the main villain. He was going to be Kang the Conqueror. You know, this was revealed some time ago. And so I wonder if, you know, that was an official reveal. And I wonder if how the trailers for some recent films have been, is that why perhaps they decided to go all out with revealing him in the trailer for this? Because, for example, if you look at No Way Home, everyone kind of knew that the returning actors were in No Way Home. Like, it had been leaked, it had been revealed, it had been speculated for months. And, you know, gradually they revealed the villains, specifically Green Goblin, Doctor Octopus, and Sandman. But, like, oh, and Jamie Foxx's Elektra as well. But it's like people already kind of had a strong suspicion that, you know, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield were in it, but they kept that hidden. And while I think it works there, I don't know. I'm not sure why. Because it seems like, as you watch the movie, it seems like Kang's reveal is meant to be a sudden, unexpected thing. But he's on the posters, he's on the trailers. We know he's in the movie. We know who's playing him. We know who he is. We've already seen this character before. We've seen this actor as a variant of this character already. So, yeah, it's a bit of a confusing marketing thing, that one. I will say there's a couple of things I want to talk about which you could probably count as spoilers. So, yeah, I'll probably get to those. Oh, I got off topic, didn't I? I was talking about Catherine Newton as Cassie. She's brilliant. I really like her. I think she works very well. Again, I buy her relationship with Scott. I buy her relationship with Scott a bit more than the actress who played her in Endgame. I didn't really buy them as much. So, some little bits that I suppose count as spoilers. It's revealed that Janet met Kang while she was stuck in the quantum realm, and she actually helped him, you know, sort of, you know, get his ship working again, and he tried to say that he would help her get back home to Hope, but then she saw, you know, his history as a tyrant, as a conqueror, and decided to oppose him. I thought that was all pretty cool. I thought it was a great, you know, hero moment for Janet, and sort of explained that kind of she was responsible. Like, she sort of sees Kang as kind of her responsibility. It does kind of create a slight plot hole with Ant-Man and the Wasp's post-credit sequence, where they send Scott back into the quantum realm to find to get the particles that Ghost needs to survive. However, you could possibly argue that this is an area of the quantum realm that we've not seen before. Like, even when Hank rescued Janet, you know, the area she was in didn't look like this. In fact, if anything, it looked slightly better than this. You know, the quantum realm in Ant-Man and the Wasp looks much more vibrant and kind of a bit more of a head, you know, something that's going to mess with your head than this does. There's also no explanation of any of the weird powers that Janet seemed to have at the end of the last movie, although maybe they only linked with Ghost because of her exposure to that realm. But I don't know. You know, there's some moments in this where if she did have powers, they would have come in quite handy. But yeah, the plot hole, if there is one, seems to be, you know, why they sent Scott back to the quantum realm to get things for Ghosts. But you could argue that maybe they're in a different part of the quantum realm. Maybe they haven't shrunk down quite so small, because they shrink down quite a lot at the, you know, as they get dragged into the quantum realm at the start. There's also no real heist in this movie. Not in the same way that there is in the previous two. You know, the first Ant-Man was very much a heist movie. There's a heist, there's, well, a couple of heists almost in the second one. I do think Ant-Man and the Wasp is a bit more of a disjointed film anyway, in a lot of respects. But, you know, this is a bit more solid than that is. It's a bit more focused on the characters and what they're all doing. But there's no heist. The closest you really kind of get to a heist is the moment where Kang recruits Scott to get him back the piece he needs for his machine, and that involves all the shots in the trailers of the multiple Ant-Men. But it's not quite a heist. It has some very funny moments and some quite heartfelt moments, but it's not a heist, not in the same way. There's no real plan to it. There's none of the sort of heist trappings. MODOK and Kang are great. MODOK, I think, gets quite a bit to do. His last lines are quite funny as well. Kang is just cool, and I really doubt that this is the last we have seen of that variant of Kang. It's kind of implied that it is towards the end of the film, but I don't buy it. Like I said, Wasp doesn't seem to have much to do. There's a bit of an ominous ending. And there's also the post-credits, the little will return stinger. I don't know if anyone else pays as much attention to these as I do. Everyone seems to talk about the post-credit sequences, but to me, one of the most interesting parts of the MCU, ever since... well, I think Iron Man 3 was the first one where I really noticed it change, is the little X character will return at the end of the films, because Iron Man 3, it doesn't say Iron Man will return, it says Tony Stark will return, sort of suggesting that he's moving beyond Iron Man. Which, you know, bears some weight the next time we see him. You know, the idea that he did step away from being Iron Man for a while. And then, of course, some of the other films have done similar sort of things. So, like, Captain America Civil War ended with a stinger that said Spider-Man will return. Not Captain America, not Iron Man, not any of the main characters, but Spider-Man. You know, Thor Ragnarok, you know, as Thor will return in Infinity War. Infinity War was Thanos will return. You know, so it always seems to be the third film in whatever trilogy is doing something different. And in this one, it's Kang will return, not Ant-Man will return, not the Wasp will return. Kang will return. And, you know, the post-credit sequences bear that out. The post-credit sequences feature Jonathan Majors playing multiple variants of Kang. You know, specifically Immortus, Ramatut, the Centurion, Victor Timely. There's even a little clip from Loki Season 2 suggesting that he's going to have a bigger role in that. So, yeah, it looks very, very interesting. And has some great potential for the future. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing more of this character and more of what he could do. I mean, Jonathan Majors, all of the variants we've seen so far feel different. Like, Kang does not feel like He Who Remains. There are differences there. They're subtle. There's a lot of similarities. They are still variants of the same person. But there are differences. I also thought this was the best movie that gave Michael Douglas something to do. You know, Michael Douglas hasn't had much to do as Hank Pym in the previous movies. This movie gives him something to do, gives him some quite interesting moments, which just makes it more annoying that Wasp is so underutilized. Like, Hope Van Dyne does not, like, she gets some action roles, but she doesn't really get any big emotional stuff to do. And yeah, like I said, a lot of the aspects that sort of seem to be hinted at in the trailer, where Kang's suggesting that he'll, you know, give Scott the time back with Cassie, you know, using the bits of footage from the previous movies. None of that's in here. Like, the flashback scenes aren't. There are elements of, you know, I can give you the time back. But it's more, you know, Kang sort of makes that promise with Janet when he's trying to get her on side, not with anyone else. Not really with Scott. But there is still some element of the relationship there. And like I said, I like Catherine Newton in the role. I like that, you know, their relationship feels real. It feels honest. It feels like, you know, a parent of a teenager who's missed some time because he's been away. But so yeah, I enjoyed it. Do I think it feels like the start of a phase? I don't know. What does the phase of Marvel feel like? You know, to me, the only phase which has really felt cohesive, for want of a better term, has been Phase 1. Phase 1 was clearly building towards the Avengers, which it did, and did brilliantly. Phase 2 was kind of dealing with the aftermath of the Battle of New York and, you know, the fact that the heroes had been established, but then the final film was Ant-Man. You know, Phase 3 started with Civil War, which broke the Avengers up, but then went on to introduce a whole load of new characters. You know, it was, you know, doing Guardians Volume 2, doing Doctor Strange, doing Spider-Man, doing Black Panther, before we really got Thor, or saw any of those characters again. And yes, it ends with Infinity War and Ant-Man and the Wasp, Captain Marvel, and Endgame, but there's a big part in the start of Phase 3, which is very muddled. And Phase 4, again, a lot of people have said they're not really sure what it's doing. A lot of Phase 4 has felt like closing out the story arcs for the older generation of heroes, dealing with the aftermath of the blip. You know, we've seen that in Thor: Love and Thunder, we've seen it in Wakanda Forever, we've seen it in Hawkeye, we've seen it in Doctor Strange, we've seen it in WandaVision, we've seen it in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and a lot of that is still true here. The only argument that you could say that makes this feel different is that it is focused on the multiverse, focused on these variants of Kang. you know, sort of building on the plot thread from Loki season 1. But I don't know. I think it's too early yet to say what Phase 5 is going to be, like what it's going to feel like, which, like I said, feels such a bizarre quantifier, because, like I said, the most together phase, in my opinion, is Phase 1, and Phase 1 is not all good quality. Like, Iron Man 2 is awful, Thor is okay but not great, Incredible Hulk is, again, okay but not great. You know, in fact, you could probably, you know, if you're doing it as a rewatch, you could probably skip most of Phase 1. Maybe watch Iron Man because it's a pretty good quality movie. Maybe watch Captain America. But if you wanted to, you could just watch Avengers. You don't really need the rest. Whereas, I think for the meta plot going forward, Quantumania is going to be important. And yeah, it ends on quite an ominous note. You know, that Scott's final narration suggests that, yeah, there's worse to come than Kang. Because that's the thing as well. Kang is exiled into the quantum realm by his variants. And he implies that they are worse than he is. But then, of course, the Council of Kangs that all comes together at the end, you know, Immortus, the Centurion, the Rama-Tut, they are aware of the Avengers and aware of the Avengers knowing about them. So there's a lot of interesting potential here. And yeah, I'm interested. I'm excited for Kang Dynasty. The person writing Kang Dynasty is the Jeff Loveness who wrote this. He's also written some very, very good episodes of Rick and Morty. He knows the sort of time-bendy stuff, and he does that very, very well. So yes, I'm interested to see what he's going to put in Kang Dynasty. I think it could be a lot of fun. He's teased that there might be quite a high body count. Thing is, whenever they tease that after Infinity War, a lot of people are going to be like, well, how many of them are going to really stick? But there are a lot of heroes on the table now. Counting all the new ones, counting all the old ones, there's a lot of heroes on the table. They could quite comfortably kill several major characters. And Infinity War, as many characters actually survived that, but across Infinity War and Endgame, I think 4 or 5 major characters died. You know, there was Loki, there was Heimdall, there was the Vision, twice, Black Widow, and then Captain America is written out as well, and Iron Man. You know, so you know, I know a variant of Loki came back, but it's not the same Loki. The Loki that we've been following died. Gamora died. You know, again, Gamora's come back, but it's not the same Gamora. Same with Vision. So there's potential for more characters to die, even if variants stick around in the future. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, Quantumania. What did you think about it? I'd love to hear anyone else's thoughts. I'm probably going to do more reviews like this now, rather than doing a full episode, just talk for a bit and give my thoughts. Thoughts for this were a bit more rambly. I think the thing with Marvel is there's a lot to pass for the future, and what things all mean and how they slot together, than there is for some other stuff. I think my next big review is going to be Star Trek Strange New Worlds, because I finally got around to watching that, and it's very good, and I just want to gush about it for a little bit. But yeah, until next time, everyone.
Thank you, my friends, for once again joining me on Garhdo Goes Geek. Your continued support for this podcast means the absolute world to me, and I am grateful for every single one of you who stays and listens to one of my episodes. It means the absolute world. Now, if you would like to engage more with me or the podcast, We have a Discord community, small but growing, and we now have commissions open on Ko-Fi. So if there's a topic you would like to see me cover, you can pay me to cover it. All funds will be used for legal purchase of the relevant items where I do not have them. Have a look on the link tree for more information. Until next time, look after yourselves.